What was the moment that you look back on your SilverStripe journey? What was the hardest moment?
It probably would have been about the time that we sort of decided to go open source. So this was very, very early days, but you're really questioning the existence of the company and what company you're going to be, and you make a big bet. And it could have sunk us entirely, or it could have we were doing this project for a company who didn't pay the bill. I think they had us like $30,000, which was masses of money for us. But I remember sort of getting to this point where I'd totally run out of cash. The Friday before, I'd gone down to the ATM with my personal credit card, emptied my personal bank account, given the staff sort of their wages. I wanted to buy some lunch, and it's like, okay, we've got no food in the office, and I wanted to go and buy like a cheeseburger from McDonald's, which is across the road. It's like 99 cents. It's like, I don't even have that.
As a founder of companies myself, you've just got to get after it, and you've got to prove that it's going to work as quick as possible or fail as quick as possible, right?
With Runn, I was willing to make the bet with my money and my time, just 150% conviction. But even then, I was very hesitant to ask even some family and friends, because I didn't know if I was willing to risk their money. Once you've got something real, once you've got sort of that product market fit, once you've got evidence of the fact that you can scale, then it becomes almost a bit of a mathematical conversation. It's like, here's all inputs, here's our hypothesis, does this align?
Does it detract from like the 10 times engineers type people?
In my experience, it's the 10x team that makes the difference, not the 10x engineer.
What's the objective with Runn? Like, what's your big dream?
Our vision is...
Hey everyone, as you just saw from that amazing trailer that Jono and I produced, mainly Jono, we have Tim Copeland on the podcast today. Tim is the founder of SilverStripe, massive Wellington success story, and now founder and CEO of Runn. Really cool guy, really cool guest. He talks a lot about the journey of being a young founder, like founded SilverStripe at 18, to now doing it again, but doing it with kids this time, doing it global, remote, lots of different challenges, lots of different things that we discuss. You're going to get heaps of good information from this episode. So enjoy it. Before you enjoy it, though, just pause it right now, pop down, hit subscribe, hit follow. We are getting so many people watching this podcast now. So many of you. It's phenomenal. All we're looking to do now is commit to us a little bit more. Just hit that button, help us out, help us to monetize this podcast so that we can go to Christchurch or Queenstown or locations, or we can fly guests in and help us, so that Jono can buy better equipment, so that I can use Photoshop more on my face to make it more enjoyable to watch. And so you can enjoy these episodes. And so enjoy this one. Tim's an absolute treat of a guy, and I'm sure you will.
Kia ora. Thanks for tuning in to the We Fucking Love Startups podcast, brought to you by Talent Army.
Cool, man. Cool. How's your week been anyway?
It's been pretty full on.
Why is it full on?
Been in the middle of also some pretty heavy recruitment at the moment, so we're growing the North American sort of team quite aggressively at the moment. So,
have you done much recruitment in the US before?
Not much, no. Yeah. So and I think it was actually we've got a few people in the States, but so predominantly Canada is where we're hiring at the moment. Yeah.
Why Canada?
Culturally, it's really similar to New Zealand, so that's always useful. And then a little bit of luck as well. So I think we've just hired, we hire sort of remotely, so all around the world. But I think we've just got a cluster of people, particularly in Vancouver now.
Vancouver's a cool city, man. I really like it.
It is a cool city. Yeah. It's a real cool city, and it's really easy to get to as well.
Yeah.
So I think from a just logistical perspective, there's 2 flights and you're in Vancouver.
Yeah.
Go to sleep, wake up. It's easy as. Time zones are pretty similar.
Yeah, and it costs a lot less than San Francisco or somewhere to hire some salesperson, right?
Totally. Yeah.
It's insane. Actually, I was talking to someone the other day in recruitment. We were talking about some sales or partner role or something, and they were like, "Oh, look, we'll look at either New Zealand or the US." And I was like, "Yeah, cool. What's your budget?" Just FYI though, because you pretty much have to triple your salary in the US for this role, right? And she was like, no, definitely not. Maybe an extra 20K. And I was like, no, here's some data. I was like, you could hire 3 people in Wellington, or, 1 person in the US. And it's a whole completely different experience as well in terms of the recruiting process.
One of the interesting things we've done with Runn is that we've sort of taken the opinion early on that we value talent over location. And we've got fixed salary pay bands, which we even publish on our website. And it's same regardless of where in the world you live. That's been a really interesting tension that we've brought into our hiring process, is that everybody knows what the sort of salary is before you come into it, and there's no negotiations around it.
Because you publish everyone's salaries on your website, right?
We do.
Yeah, like true buffer styles. And
Yeah.
Has that been an attractor or a detractor or a bit of both?
I'm sure it's a bit of both, but overwhelmingly it's been a very, very positive thing for us in a number of sort of ways which I hadn't probably anticipated as well. So I think, I'm not sure exactly what the stats are at the moment, but I think we're a bit over sort of 50% sort of female in terms of just gender balance in the company. And a lot of the feedback we've had is that the fact that there's no negotiation around salary is one of the reasons that people apply, and also one of the reasons that people leave the job, because they feel there's inequality just there, even if everything else in the company is great.
It was interesting. I was talking to Danny Smith. If you know Danny, he's the CFO now at Story Park, former Xero guy. We were talking about salaries yesterday, actually, and he talked about how at Xero, what the grads did, like I think it was 2020 maybe, someone put together a spreadsheet and they all just posted their salaries on there as a bit of a, stand in a group and stand proud. And it really helped them all negotiate salaries as they were growing, because they kept adding their salaries to it as like over a couple of years, just so that people could see. And yeah, I think it definitely helps. And like, the statistics don't lie. Gender, it's a lot harder women find it harder to negotiate salaries. Dudes, you know what dudes are like, they'll just come in and go, yeah, I'm, first year software grad, 180 grand, of course. I think it's definitely proven that if you are open and transparent with salaries, it makes it a little bit easier. But then my question is always, does it detract from like the 10 times engineers type people?
Maybe it does, but it also detracts from people who think they're 10x engineers, right? And in my experience, it's the 10x team that makes the difference, not the 10x engineer. So trying to get that sort of that harmony and alignment of the team is so much more powerful than the individual.
How do you make a 10x team?
This is, I suppose, one of the core theories about what we're trying to do with Runn, with our product. You look at one sort of end of the spectrum, which is very much sort of the industrial age sort of thinking, is that there's, you're looking at productivity, and how do you get productivity? You sort of optimize your processes. You make sure that every sort of minute of the day is sort of mapped out, and there's like sort of real clarity, and all work is broken down into small chunks, right? So that's very much the industrial age way of getting productivity. And man, did it work when you're building cars and laying bricks and things like that. Super effective. When you're looking at a different type of work, so this is like heavily knowledge-based work, you've got to have quite a different approach, and it's because there is no formula going into things. So what you need to do is not so much about sort of squeezing every hour of the day. It's about sort of giving the right balance of attributes, I suppose, which is going to sort of form the team and make people do good work. And the way that we look at that is that you've got the really hygienic stuff, which is of course the core of resource planning, which is what Runn does, which is do you have the availability to do the work, and do you have the skills to do the work? So that's the 101. Then the next level of maturity is like, well, what else drives people? And the situation you don't want to end up in is when a manager or the leadership is telling people what to do all of the time, because and I suppose the individual contributor just taking the instructions and going about it. Because again, it doesn't work as well for knowledge-based work. So what we also look at is what are the other drivers that's going to make people and teams exceptional in their role taking on a bit of work.
What are those drivers?
Example I often share there is I had a project in my previous business, which was a client that I'd been pitching for a long time, really, really wanted to work. And we had, and it was for the doing some work with the red meat industry in New Zealand, like this wicked farming project. And I had a team of people who were just technically exceptional on the bench, ready to go. It was just a perfect fit, except the team of people I had, all of them were vegetarian.
Oh wow! Yeah.
So they would not have given their best work to that work had it been about, I don't know, maybe a hydroponic farm or something else. Yeah, the entirely different motivations. Like they are going to be intrinsically sort of driven to do their work. So So that's kind of what we look at is, what are all the intrinsic motivators that make people want to do the work themselves, as opposed to having to being told to do the work. And if you can try and discover that with Runn, something that's quite important for us as we're building our team is time zones, and making sure that time zones aren't going to get in the way, because we've got people scattered all around the world. And there are some projects which are we can do very, very sort of async. So time zone doesn't matter too much, but when you've got to have very tight collaboration with design and technical people, a bit of real time feedback is very useful. So we want to bring those people together in the time zones. But really, it's about sort of going beyond just looking at are they available and do they have the skills, and looking at all these other attributes which are important to create alignment.
And what are you looking at? So when they come to you, when you're going through that recruiting process, right? Like, how do you find those values or those attributes that you're looking for?
At a recruitment level, like, that's not the determinant of if they're going to sort of do the work, because I think what people want once they're actually in the company is going to change over time. So I think more from a recruitment perspective, what we look at is just competency and fit with the team. And a big one for us, which is because we're so distributed and remote, some people thrive in that environment and other people get really lonely. And you've got to make sure that you've got everything else around you set up in a way that being remote is going to be a massive positive in your life rather than a detractor.
Because you guys went remote before even COVID was a thing, right?
Yeah.
Why did you go remote?
For us, it sort of started out as a bit of a necessity. So I think when we started up the company, I was here in Wellington actually when we started it. Although it wasn't really even a company, it was just kind of this idea I had. And my wife sort of picked up a professorship over in University of San Francisco, so we sort of jumped on a plane with the family and we went and hung out there for a year. But at the same time, I'd hired a few engineers back in Wellington. No, they're in Auckland actually. So we sort of really partnered up with them from day one. But their engineers were sort of scattered around the place. So I think they had predominantly in Auckland, but also in Sydney, I think, at the time. We always were remote, and as we've hired, we've just kind of got the best people that we can possibly get, regardless in the world we are, and it really hasn't been a problem for scaling up in that way.
So Runn, for people that don't know what Runn is, I guess, how would you describe Runn?
So very simplistically, we're a resource management tool, and what that is that we help companies who've got predominantly sort of large-ish sort of project-based staff, so 50 plus. Up into the thousands, and it helps them figure out what work they're doing and building the right teams to do that work. It sounds incredibly simple when you say it that way, but the complexities, I think, and the value add that we do is just making sure that everybody's got clarity across the entirety of the company about who's doing what and where. And it's different to project management, because I think that often people get confused about project management. So project management is very much about what tasks you've got to do. Resource management is the other side of the coin, which is where is time going to be spent. And I think it's another analogy for that is that you've got sort of this perpetual tension between the ambition of a company, that's all the things you want to do, and the practical reality, what's the capability and capacity of your existing workforce, and how do those two align.
And I've been spouting to anyone that'll listen to me that we're going to, as the years go on, we're going to be moving much more to a time-based contractor model, I think, in the future, especially in like countries like New Zealand, where we're losing talent left, right and centre. At the moment, a lot of people are popping up as contractors because if they're staying here, they need the money. And I think with the amount of project things that we need, like even in recruitment, we're seeing it. You see more people just going to hourly rate contractors and moving to that model. And so it's definitely getting a lot harder for people to be able to manage people and projects and the way they do these things.
Yeah, it's definitely true, and I think it's even outside the New Zealand context. It's what we're observing is that you roll the clock back and the walls around a company were very, very solid. You didn't really have subcontractors came in and out. You were employee and employee for life.
Henry Ford had it easy, right?
In some respects, absolutely. Because again, if you go back to sort of the way that they got work done, is that they sort of you want to get high degrees of repeatability and very small sort of jobs tasked and broken down. But again, for the knowledge based work, that matters less so. So what we're sort of seeing now is that there's a wave of organisations with vastly more permeable walls. And what I suggest actually it's far more advanced even in North America at the moment. So, if you're talking about your workforce, even 10, 15 years ago, what you would be talking about is your employees. If you're talking about your workforce today, what you're talking about is your vendors and your contractors and your employees. And your employees aren't just full-time, they're also part-time employees as well. So that the landscape's got radically different. But just to sort of put some stats around that, it's like 40 to 50% of the workforce is not employees, and a lot of tech companies in North America in particular.
That's an amazing stat. 40 to 50%.
Yeah.
Are no longer FTE fixed, like no longer full-time employees.
It's less about, I suppose, the company and maybe more about the jobs and getting the right people for the right jobs and sort of increasing that fluidity. So that's one of the things that we're working on as well, is how do you manage that? And it's also got some really interesting challenges just from a management perspective, right? Because if you've got employees, you've got a degree of authority to dictate what happens. But if you've got vendors on site, if you've got contractors, you've got authority, but it's a different type, and you need a different way of managing it. So the area that we try and help companies is like, well, okay, let's work on what's going to be intrinsically motivating to all these people, so that people are doing the work that they want to do, as opposed to having to sort of put really tight guide rails in place.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think I always find that companies that have lots of contractors on project work and selected contractors for their competencies always have a better culture, just because people are motivated by the project or the things, and it's easy to manage those type of people. And so, yeah, it's an interesting future that we're going to see like fall in front of us, I think. Where did this problem come from? Like, where did you come up with the idea for Runn?
We sort of grew from a bunch of sort of 18-year-olds to building it to really one of New Zealand's largest sort of digital transformation companies. And what was interesting in that journey is that as you started getting scale and success, loads of stuff became easier, because you're able to get sort of a lot better sort of management. You're able to get all your process and systems worked really well.
When was that time? When was the time that you realised? So SilverStripe, for people that, like, I'm assuming everyone knows SilverStripe. If anyone's listening to this that doesn't know who SilverStripe are, you go and look them up. One of Wellington and New Zealand's most successful open sourced product and agency business. Is it the way you describe them, or did I do that really poorly?
I'll take it.
Yeah. And so you founded SilverStripe with a few friends straight out of school.
Yeah.
When was the moment that you realised, oh wow, we're unlocking levels now, it's getting easier?
I think there's layers, which is like when you get layers of management. So I think you get past about the 12-person mark, which is like, okay, there's more people than you can sort of manage directly. And then probably it's like around 30 people, 50 people, 100 people. I think those are kind of the jumps that we went through.
Are you a good leader? Like, are you one of those early guys that can, lead a team? Is that in your sort of toolkit? Well, I hope so, as a CEO.
I hope so. I mean, there's heaps I need to work on. One of the really interesting things there as well is that what makes you a good leader to start something isn't the same skill set which makes you a good leader at scale. And some of the challenges and feedback I get from my team is that sometimes I'm very hands off, but other things I've got very strong opinions about, and I want to sort of push those through. And I'm trying to figure out, like, what is the balance for when I interject myself versus I say, well, no, I need to sort of step back and build up competency of the team, which is, if you're reading textbook, of course, that's the way to do it. But then you've also got sort of the practical realities of we're going real hard and real fast, and we need to make lots of right decisions very quickly. And I'm bottom line, I've still got the accountability for it. So.
Is Runn going faster than SilverStripe in the early days?
Yeah. No, it's a different base entirely now.
So what are the lessons that you could learn, that you learned from SilverStripe? Because you guys grew pretty quickly too, and like you had talk us through, because you guys with the open source community blew up really quickly all around the world, and we had people, searching out New Zealand to come here because of SilverStripe. So talk us through that journey. That's an interesting story.
Yeah, it was a cool story. A lot of dumb luck actually into it, but probably actually the one story which is useful about why that business grew so quickly. When we were, I think we're a few years into the business, and we developed this content management system. So it's a platform for managing websites. And the business model that we wanted to run there was we were going to license it to web development shops, and they become resellers, and you kind of have this theoretical idea of this massive scalability. And again, textbook stuff sounds like great. There's brilliant business plans of showing repeatability and scale, and there's lovely spreadsheets. But the reality is that we were too small to get serious buy-in for people building big websites. So we couldn't really resell it effectively. We ended up being the implementer as well. And what we then found out is that when we would go and pitch the whole solution, so hey, we'll build your website and we'll license you our software. The actual licensing of the software, is just a rounding error on the profit margin. So we were kind of fooling ourselves that we were actually making money by this licensed bit of software. And I think one of the other sort of things which is going on is that every web developer who had come across trying to build websites in that era, and this was early 2000s, had exactly the same game plan. So one of the things that I think the insights we had there was like, it's not just about competing on product, and the product was good, but there were lots of good products around. You've also got to compete with a different business model. So the business model that we chose is, well, what happens if we just open source it? We give everything away, and let's see how that changes the game.
How did that idea come about? Like, talk me through that.
I suppose there are a few companies which had done it. I think we may have been one of the first in the world at the time to go from proprietary to open source. But there wasn't much in the way of a textbook about how to do this or how it's going to turn out. But basically what we figured out is that we've got nothing to lose here. It's, I think that the one risk that we did see is that all our clients who we had licensed this bit of software for, and we weren't charging a lot of money, but $1,000 a month type thing for it, we were worried that they would turn around and go, it's open source, well, I'm not paying for that now. And after we made the move, released it open source, we kind of were apprehensive of like what was going to happen, and nothing happened. We still invoiced them for the website, hosting. It was a slightly different wording on the line item. We were just transparent about the fact it was all open source, but it didn't actually change the revenue at all for the business. So that was an interesting perspective, because all of a sudden we were...
I can imagine like the people sitting there staring at monitor waiting for emails to come in. That would have been an interesting time.
It was. The other thing which I always found funny is that actually open sourcing something is really expensive to do. Like, we had to sort of go through the whole code base, make sure there was just nothing sort of proprietary that we were just dependent on ourselves in order to actually make it fully open source. But the end benefit of that was two things happen. Like, one is that you walk into the market and say, hey, you're free. It basically sort of shuts down a lot of the competition. And so there's a bit of benefit for that, but probably even more so what it meant is that there's other agencies who weren't really aware of us, started paying attention and thought, well, actually, this is so much better if we just work together. So we started building up a community of people who would work on the software. So we actually became a lot more collaborative with people who we were in competition with. That was one cool thing. And the other thing which happened there is you got a bit of international renown. So I think we had we got into one of Google's programs where they gave us a bit of sponsorship, which was great for reputation, particularly sort of hidden away in the bottom of the planet here in New Zealand. And then we did some really great work with the US Democratic Party. So
I remember that.
It was cool. So it was basically a lot of Obama's web work was done on the SilverStripe platform, and you don't get access to those opportunities unless you've got a really strong reputation. By that time, we had technically a really strong reputation.
Was there much like governance and like due diligence, being that it was Obama's website?
Yeah, so this is one of the really interesting things. There was heaps, but we didn't know about it. So I think that there's a lot of due diligence on the code which happens behind the scenes before they even talk to us. And I think on us as individuals, there's a lot of due diligence which happened behind the scenes. So I remember sort of, it was like, way after we were in this engagement, there's just a note, and Yeah, I mean, they definitely had people looking into who we were.
Some CIA operative was reading your Twitter profile.
I don't know the details, but it's but yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot of due diligence, but I think that's one of the nice things about open source is that there's a lot of transparency around it. So it does have a bunch of good benefits around that. I think one of the challenges though is like, well, how do you then make that a sustainable business model? Because the consultancy game is fine, but then really what you want to do is turn that into a you want product, you want IP, and you want leverage. So what we ended up doing, and this was years after the fact, we actually sort of won a contract to run a lot of the New Zealand government websites, and we became the default platform for 8 years or so. And there's a bunch of managed services that we applied on top of the content management system, which was all the value add, the management, the IP, the expertise that we had, which was different to the open source community. So we have those two things which run in parallel.
What was the moment that you look back on your SilverStripe journey and say, fuck, that was cool? Like, what was the real moment for you?
There was some just big deals that we'd won, and they were big deals. But I think we won like in New Zealand, so to do the website, and I think we've got about half the banks in New Zealand to run their platform off our website, and a large chunk, I think about 70% of the New Zealand government sort of public sector runs off SilverStripe websites at the moment. I think that there's lots of little wins along the way there, which you're like, actually you're doing something which matters.
What was the hardest moment?
It probably would have been about the time that we sort of decided to go open source. So this was very, very early days, but you're really questioning the existence of the company and what company you're going to be, and you make a big bet, and it could have sunk us entirely, or it could have something cool could have happened, and something cool did happen, but that would have been the hardest moment, because for years you sort of struggle away, and you've got no money. Actually, a story in that I remember this one time where we had a client, I think it was about year 2. So we were so naive, we didn't understand that we had to, for example, pay taxes. So all income that we had from our client work in year 1, I was like, yeah, cool, so got this money, and we were just paying it straight out to our staff, and just
how old were you at this point?
I think we'd be about 18 at the time. And then our accountants did the accounts at the end of the year and said, well, here's your tax bill. We're like, what? Got to pay tax and stuff. So we've got that degree of naivety, but at the same time we were doing this project for a company who didn't pay their bill. I think they had us like $30,000, which was masses of money for us. It was like 2 months of payroll or something, because we really weren't paying ourselves much. But I remember sort of getting to this point where I'd totally run out of cash. Like the Friday before, I'd gone down to the ATM with my personal credit card, emptied my personal bank account, given the staff sort of their wages and
cash in brown paper envelope.
And I remember sort of turning up to work, and we worked stupidly hard. Like I think I'd go home to my parents for dinner, and then have dinner, and then sort of come back into the office from about 6 to midnight, and just going hard. And everyone was doing that. But as I wanted to buy some lunch, and it's like, okay, we've got no food in the office, and I wanted to go and buy like a cheeseburger from McDonald's, which was across the road. It's like 99 cents. It's like, I don't even have that. And I remember having to go and ask one of my clients, like, can I get a few bucks so I can buy myself lunch? Because that was it. I had no cash left. And it's funny. Like it was never existential for me, because I still was living at home and I had my parents and what have you. But it was you do get those moments where it's like, man, this kind of sucks. Yeah.
I love that story. What do you think's like? So if I was to probably summarize every single person I've spoken to on this podcast, I would say most of them are like, oh, we had the best culture. Like people would literally just stay all night and code. We were just smashing it out. It was the best time of our lives. I made the best friends that I've got now, like into my later years. And that doesn't happen anymore. Like it's now like the society has changed a little bit, where people tend to, protect their personal lives. And I agree they should, like as someone that's burnt out, many times in my career, definitely don't burn out if you don't have to. But I do reminisce a little bit about the old days. You know, like I remember the old days as well, where I would be still at the office, you know, with friends going hard, and they're the people that you make deep connections with that you share for the rest of your life.
Absolutely. I mean, there's some deep friendships forged in war like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. So my perspective on that, because I wonder about it as well. Is it just because we're getting old?
Yeah.
Because like I loved that stuff, loved it. But it's just I've got like 2 coming on 3 kids. I've got no time.
Yeah.
Outside of work. There's always a point where I think the pursuit of work becomes selfish. And I think when you don't have a family, you can go hard. Like it's all about you, and you have this amazing freedom to do what you want, but you don't have the same degrees of freedom, you know, when you've got kids, because you've got obligations to them and everything else that's going on.
And that's what I worry about, though, is I worry about, because I interview so many younger people, right? I won't say kids because they're not kids, but they feel like to me, because I'm an old angry man yelling at the cloud, you know. But I worry that like those are your formative years where you can learn so much, you know, and you can literally set yourself up for the rest of your life. Whether the old days were better or the new days are better, like it's just a constant thing that I think about in my mind, you know. So are they going to be better longer term because they've got more energy, you know, and we're not burning them out in sort of 5 years like we all did? Or are they going to be less beneficial because they're getting to our age and they probably haven't learned as much through mistakes and long nights and, you know, solving problems together as a group?
It's interesting because we at Runn, like I think, you know, by and large we're a slightly older group than we were at SilverStripe. You know, we were a bunch of teenage delinquents, so when we started the company, so we should be. I think everyone still goes really hard, even though like we're sort of 4 days a week. Like when people are on, they are on.
And is that because they're just really passionate about what they're doing and the problem that they're solving?
Yeah, they're super passionate. They're hyper connected, and it's one of the fun things actually about the fact that, you know, we've got quite a globally distributed team, is that there's always people who are awake and willing to jump into things. So it happens predominantly. I see it on our dev channels. Like if there's somebody needs to troubleshoot something with somebody, like within a few minutes, someone's put their hand up and said, "Yeah, let's jump on a call," and that happens really, really fast, and it's just constantly going on. So I think the bits that we miss is that you don't, for example, so we'll go out, you know, drinking every Friday night. Arguably, there's a degree of healthiness about that as well. But yeah, we still get together and hang out. So I think it's again, it's harder, but we've got, I think, 3 people who are over in Bali at the moment, and we've got, you know, one of our crew lives there, and to just going to sort of hang out and spend a bit of time together. Likewise with Vancouver and Toronto, and we do a lot of sort of regional sort of get-together, so there is that sort of chance to sort of be in person and hang out and get to know each other beyond sort of the tasks at hand. That's
going to be a weird thing when you get together with people that you've been working so hard with, never meet them for the first time, and you're like fast friends already.
It's real weird. It's real. I mean, I love it though, because it's you know, I meet so many people like every day, like, you know, there's clients and investors, and I personally just love the fact that I can just walk down to my office downstairs at home, and it's all on. And then you go and hang out with people, and you know them really well.
I think it's it's a funny thing. Like we're definitely seeing a lot of clients now trying to get people back into offices. We're seeing in Wellington in particular, right? The Wellington city, you know, it's pretty quiet, you know, and a lot of the retail shops are suffering a little bit, you know, and so there's a drive to try and get people back. And I don't know if it's going to come back full time or not. Like, who knows? I don't think, I'm not sure. I think what we should be investing in Wellington is more like shared working spaces that provide a platform where people can go in a couple of days a week, or, you know, don't have to go into one particular office, and companies should just get together and co-create spaces or do whatever they can. I think everyone's too scared to do commercial real estate at the moment.
Yeah, and I think that's where we're sort of forming. So we've got, I suppose, a hub in Wellington and a hub of people in Vancouver, and to a lesser extent up in Auckland at the moment as well. And when people want to have a bit of social contact, they'll just kind of arrange, hey, I'm going to go into the city and hang out in a co-working space. So we make it, we've got an allowance basically for co-working space. So whenever people want to do it, they can do it. So it's not a financial barrier to it. And I think the cadence of like about, you know, once a week to once every 2 weeks, that seems to be sort of the mix that we're finding works well.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. Like we've never felt the need to go to hang out in the office for productivity at all. It's 100% social.
Well, a lot of internet kids, right? We've all grown up now on the internet anyway, and so like most of my best friends were people that I didn't know for years on Twitter. And now they're my best friends. But we just had such great relationships online together. And so like working that way just feels easy.
Definitely, and I think it's also like the collaboration tools are now so good online. A lot of times they're better than offline. The other challenge we've got as well, just with building culture is we want to be really careful not to exclude people who aren't in the hubs. So we try and do everything async. So even if you've got a few people hanging out in person to do work, you try and do it in a format that still enables collaboration. From
what tools do you use? What work well for you?
So I think we've got a range of tools we use, but Figma for design works really well. Slack's pretty good for just general comms. We use Runn obviously for a lot of the high levels of scheduling and forecasting within the business.
Do you do town halls? Do you do like async town halls or anything like that?
We do like a monthly sort of get together. And we actually do that one live as well. So we sort of alternate between sort of a time zone that's compatible for Europe and a time zone that's compatible for North America. And we usually have a quarter to a third of the company sort of will turn up for those, ask a few questions. But by and large, the conversation happens outside of the presentations as well.
What's the objective with Runn? Like, what's your big dream?
Our vision is a world where neither time nor talent is wasted.
I like that.
It's a good one. It's and it's going to be hard to do. But I think the impact we want to make on the world is a lot of people, particularly in a working context, are doing things which they're not inherently sort of passionate or driven about or moving them forward. I mean, it's kind of why people change jobs.
I make a living off it.
yeah, exactly. So the question is like, well, how can we sort of solve that? Like, and our theory is that it comes down to alignment around sort of initiatives and giving people more of a voice about how things get together. And we've got from product level some pretty ambitious plans about how we're going to try and pull this off. But yeah, there's a billion people who do knowledge-based work in the world, and so that's kind of who we service. We're not anywhere remotely near penetrating a billion people.
Are your numbers open in terms of like you're transparent in terms of revenue and all that stuff as well?
We're not on revenue, but in terms of like the number of people, I think we've 25,000 people on the platform at the moment.
Wow. And are they grouped in a particular region?
Predominantly North America and Europe.
Yeah, I was going to say that's obviously where the largest customer base for you must be, right?
Exactly, and that's what we've found as well as we've grown is that the problem that we solve is useful for small companies because everybody's got a resourcing problem or trying to figure out who's doing what work, and by and large it's all spreadsheets. But the excruciating pain is for larger companies because they've got tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of payroll, and understanding like where that money's going and how that investment is turning into results, and making sure that those initiatives that they're doing are going in the right direction strategically for the company. It's very, very consequential if you get that right or wrong.
Like we're building a real-time salary product at the moment just to try and help, because we obviously do that Talent Army salary survey. And one of the features that keeps coming up in all the demos that I do is, and this is probably something that probably sits more your business, is like they'll go, would it have the ability, because we've built a whole skills matrix so that New Zealand can have a skills matrix now and say, well, this is what a level looks like and this is how you tell it to our salary, just to try and make it easier for everyone. And one of the questions we often get is, could I use that skills matrix and use that to say, well, hey, we're looking to do a project, we've got a whole budget of this, what do I need? And then it will spit out a project team if you want intermediates or seniors and whatever it means. And I find that that's interesting, like in your world, right? Because that's a space that keeps coming up to me a lot.
Yep.
Is that something that you guys are looking at?
Yes, so we've kind of got that capability.
Not that I'm asking you if I should build this or not, because I'm curious for what it's worth.
Yeah, we've got that sort of capability in Runn as well, because and it's a really, really important consideration, because
I didn't realize it was a bigger problem until I found this.
I think this is one of the things I find fascinating about sort of just building businesses, right? Is that the problems that you just assume
Yeah.
that these problems have been solved and you've missed the memo. And I think that's going back to one of your earlier questions, like, why did we do Runn? Like, we got everything became easier except for the problem of resourcing and putting people on the right projects at the right time and getting the highest impact. Like it got harder and harder as we scaled. And I just assumed that large companies, they would have had this problem solved, because I couldn't comprehend how you'd have a functioning business really beyond 100 people without sort of a good system in place. So we always sort of targeted the smaller market, for the first couple of years. And then we realized, like, hold up, nobody actually does this well uptown as well. So yeah, it's
really interesting. Hey? And I think that's like the constant message that I give to like first time founders, or like the lessons that I learned from talking to people on the podcast, is like, successful people just keep going because they just keep finding really interesting problems and then just keep trying to solve it. And then they get to a point where they're like, oh, this is the aha moment, or this is what the product should be, or this is actually what the product is now. And so like taking your initial assumptions and then sort of pushing them through enough to be open enough to hear what's actually happening in that market space. You always find that aha moment, but it doesn't happen at the start.
I think one of the other interesting things there is there's a big gap between identifying the problem, being able to solve the problem, and solving the problem in a way that customers will buy. And I remember it's this was quite humbling for me, like the whole resource management sort of problem. I intimately knew the problem, and I had a degree of technical sort of knowledge, so I could go and build the first prototypes and what have you. I knew how to sell, so I'd run sales teams. So I was well positioned as anyone could be to go and sort of start a company in this space. I remember saying to my wife, like, give us 3 months and we'll be in market. And within weeks we had prototypes which we could go and sort of take to customers. However, the gap between that and what was going to be sellable, it was about 3 years with quite a big team of people working. Like the R&D sort of cost behind it was huge, and it's very deceptive. You never quite know sort of how big that gap's going to be.
As someone building a payroll, as like a salary product, like the resource management behind the scenes, like there's so much complexity there. Like
it's very deceptive. It's very deceptive. Yeah. And the I think if you're building any product in the in the business space, your number one competitor is going to be spreadsheets or a tool like Notion. You're building a Lumini database or what have you, and those tools are really good.
Yeah, I love Notion.
Yeah, really good. So if you need to be like 10 times better than them for people to actually make the move, and I think that was the difference for us between a couple of weeks worth of effort, which is like, hey, this solves the same problem, does all the same calculations that it does now, but it needs to do it in such an elegant way that it is so much better that people are like, right, I've got to move. Like it becomes that compelling.
One thing that's interesting to me and a lot of people on this listening to this podcast is SaaS pricing, right? It's like a bit of a dark art. So everyone's like, I think it's going to be raise my finger to the wind, that, right? And then now I feel like a lot of people are moving away from like team size or seat licenses because, you become a tax as the company grows, that, you have to pay more on this. And so a lot of people are looking at dynamic pricing, right? Like if we are solving you the problem for resource management and we're saving you X amount of money, or we're doing this, can we charge this? Like, what's your thoughts around how did you come up with your pricing strategy? And like, what are your lessons you've learned along that sort of journey?
The opinion that we took was it needs to be such an absolute no-brainer to buy the product. So I think where we sort of figured out is like most of the I suppose the people who get managed on platform, they're $100,000 or plus salaries, but by and large with the nature of work they do, and we charge about between $100 and $180 per person per year. So we're an absolute rounding area on the salary. So all we need to do is can we give 10 times the value of our fees, which for us, if we're doing, making people a fraction more efficient, saving people time. There's a really clear ROI. So I think that was the very simplistic sort of view that we took initially.
I think pricing should be simplistic, right? Like it has to be easy to understand and comprehend and add value, right?
Where the simplistic approach starts falling down, though, is that if you're selling to the SMB sector, which is predominantly through product-led things, that you don't really want to get into a long sales process, so you don't really want to have negotiations around pricing. So there's just a price that's on the website and everyone pays it, you enter your credit card details. The complexity comes, I think, with the more enterprise deals, because chances are, particularly if you're in sort of startup mode, you don't have all the features that they need. There's always a bit of a conversation about, right, well, we're going to have to build this sort of functionality for you. And the view that we take is that if they want us to build something which is already on our roadmap and we're just bringing it forward, that's a conversation we'll have to sort of accelerate sort of particular deals. If it's something completely sort of off the roadmap, then it's just like we can't do it. Yeah. So that part's quite easy, but it's there's a number of sort of complexities around sort of like the legal environment they work in, the server infrastructure that we need to sort of host on. There's all these other things, which means it's not just a matter of giving a price for it as it is for SMB.
What are the, if you see some person out in New Zealand right now is building software, at their parents' house, or at home or at an office or whatever, they're thinking about, all right, this is an enterprise product that I'm taking to the US. What should I think about now? Like, what advice would you give them? These are the things that you really need to think about if you're trying to ship enterprise software in the US.
You shouldn't be doing it on a shoestring, because it's really expensive to do.
If you're a founder right now trying to build a product to take global, how much do you need?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Obviously it's how long is a piece of string, but
I think it depends on your customer base. So the way that we built Runn is that we've never concentrated in New Zealand or Australia even for that metaphor as a market. So we've always been global from day one. Which is kind of coincidental, because GD1 is one of the VCs that backed us, so cool little fit there. Europe, North America, New Zealand, Australia, we've got very, very similar business environments, and I don't think building if you're doing product-led growth, you don't really need to worry too much about the intricacies of the legal environments. In our space, we didn't anyway. It's like, you've got the same fundamental business problem that needs to get solved. So there's no sort of market dependence. I think if you need to sort of really consciously go into a particular market, and this is something that we're doing now, the kind of the hidden costs, you're going to all your contracts, which we had New Zealand law contracts, for example, for all our SMB sort of customers. Nobody cared.
Yeah.
Nobody cared. You get into the States, and you need to have your contracts done under US law. And it's kind of a non-negotiable. So
it's state by state law too, right? So do you choose the state that you're headquartered in, like Delaware?
Yeah. And I think that matters less so. It just needs to be under a US sort of court. When you're dealing with customers of a certain size. And then, of course, you need to have a US legal entity to do it. So there's a bit of setup there, and then you've got to figure out things like, well, you've got a US subsidiary, what's the transfer pricing agreement? So there's a bunch of financial work you need to do behind the scenes to figure that out. And then they're going to want insurance. So you've got to have insurance, which now goes under your US entity. Then you've got the question of, well, how does that figure out with the New Zealand insurance that we've got in place? And then you've got the question of, well, it needs probably the implementation probably needs to be done on a US server as opposed to where we had it previously, which was under European servers. So you've got two servers, and then you've got a question of, well, from an insurance perspective, you've got one server under one set of insurance, and you've got to sort of start splitting your customers out so that when you're sort of figuring out your size of insurance, you've got that figured out. You can basically ring fence these customers are covered by this insurance on this particular server. So there's kind of all of those complexities.
Which is not something you think about when you're just like, SaaS is easy. I just put it on the internet and people buy it.
It's not. And I think that's the difference between going up market into the enterprise spaces versus the SMB. So I think my recommendation was don't go up market until you're ready. And there's a lot more compliance even when you're going up market. So getting your SOC 2 certification, your ISOs, all of that stuff, it's really expensive, and it takes and it slows you down as well.
Yeah.
So you're doing a whole bunch of work in the company which has got nothing to do with the product. So I think starting in the SMB space and making sure that you're solving a real problem should be the number one goal. And I think everyone who's successful in that space, well, not every company, but most companies which are successful in that space then go to the enterprise. I mean, if you look at Salesforce back in the day, I think their pitch was for small companies with 5 people, and you prove that you can solve the problem really well, and then you go up market, because that's where you can sort of do the biggest amount of value.
Hey, so Runn, transparent salaries, work a 4-day work week. How did you raise money from GD1 and all these companies by saying, hey, we've got this team that's only going to work 4 days, we're going to do all these things, great culture? Surely VCs would be like cracking the whip saying, come on, get there 6 days a week, guys.
I suppose what people care about is performance. We've been remarkably sort of consistent in hitting our forecasts for the last 3 years or so.
Do you think the 4-day work week is tied to your results?
It's hard to say. It definitely hasn't been detrimental, though, as far as performance goes. And from a cultural perspective and just general happiness at work, it's made a big difference there. But I think it's a little bit like the SilverStripe story. It's like when you open sourced things, it was a radical decision on many from many people's perspective, but it didn't change anything.
What made you do it?
What we were looking at was how we get the best out of people, essentially.
Yeah. And
the core of the theory is that people, they've got a bit of value in year 1, a bit more in year 2, a lot more in year 3, and we wanted to build a team which is around for the long haul. So I think we're like 45 odd people now. I think we've had 3 people in total ever leave the company.
That's ridiculously low attrition.
It is, yeah.
That's like world class.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah. It's been good, and I think in terms of this employee sort of feedback of is Runn the best company you've ever worked at? Like, we get sort of just unanimous yes across everybody. So there's definitely some good things we're doing there, and that's the bit that's easy to measure. In terms of hitting the results that we need to be hitting, we're sort of hitting those at the moment. So maybe there's a multiplier effect which is happening, which is not just about all the busy time that you're spending. I think a lot of people who do 40 hours a week, outside of like the early sort of startup stage, you just need to optimize for the long term. But what I would say is that when Runn was getting built as well, man, we were going like real hard. Like the founding group, it was very much sort of 12-hour plus days. Yeah. I remember I was living in Cambridge at the time, over in the UK, and to take my sort of get up early, take my daughter to preschool, sort of head off to the science park where I had a desk. Come back up, you go hard all day, then you sort of get your kids to bed, so about 9 o'clock, and then you sort of psych yourself up again to go and to get through to about 1 o'clock worth of work. And there's just so much work you had to do, and I don't know if there's any way around that.
That's just 0 to 1 shit, right? You've got to do it.
It is, yeah.
Well, you probably don't have to do it, but I feel like as a founder of companies myself, like you've just got to get after it, and you've got to prove it's going to work as quick as possible or fail as quick as possible, right? And so you've got to spend as much time trying to solve the problem as you can initially.
That's right, and I think at the 0 to 1 stage, like you've got no evidence that you're doing the right thing. You've got a lot of self-belief. But I mean, in that time period, I remember like I totally blown it in terms of my internal expectations of when we're going to go to market, but I could still see the light. But we had like, I think it was like 4 or 5 years or something. I didn't take a cent of salary. So I was just like, all our savings just go into the company. And you just, because you've got so much on the line, you've just got to get to that sort of, that initial sort of spark of traction. And once you've got that, well, then you can sort of, you are less important. It's about building the team, and building stability within the team becomes important.
What advice would you give? Like, we're in a bit of a weird time at the moment, right? With the startup ecosystem, it's definitely, like, from my perspective, we're the canary in the coal mine as recruiters. The green shoots we're seeing are fantastic at the moment. In the product ecosystem, it's really good. Not so much in the public sector, but What advice would you give for some of these companies now that it's a different world for them now? Like you and I have both seen generations of like businesses, right? And there's a lot of people founding startups now that were like 3 years ago, you could just put a napkin in front of you and say, this is my product, and you'd sign it and give me $10 million. I'd go off and build it. Now I put a napkin in front of you and say, can I please have $2 to get a Coke or something? But what advice would you give to the people that in this generation where you had to, go off and ask your client for a cheeseburger, in this sort of model again?
As a founder, like one of the skills that I definitely do not have is selling the dream. So I remember what one funny example there was. I went to a pitch event in San Francisco, and I remember getting up on stage, and that there was some people who were doing. It was basically you had a minute to pitch, right? So it's super fast, and a bunch of people doing some blockchain and sort of AI and all these like legitimately sort of sexy sort of tools, and they got up on stage and they just blew me out of the water. Like, and you could sort of see the investors were just lapping up these ideas. Like, this one of them I remember was like it was a fiat-backed cryptocurrency for use in events, so like incredibly niche, but man, was it sexy, like the way the whole thing was presented. And I got up there and started talking about business productivity, and everyone just like, I got to about 40 seconds of my pitch, and possibly because of my heavy Kiwi accent, nobody could understand me, but just I'd lost the audience entirely. So I never had that luxury. Like I sucked at it. So I think what investors care about is like, well, do you have something real? And if you manage to build something real rather than just an idea, then I think you can ask people to take a bet on you. And it's sort of the view I took even with Runn. Like I was willing to make the bet with my money and my time, just 150% conviction, all in. But even then, like I was very, very hesitant to ask even some family and friends for cash, because I didn't know if I was willing to risk their money. So I think you need to get to a point where you're still starting to get enough conviction that you've actually got something real. And I think once you've got something real, once you've got sort of that product market fit, once you've got evidence of the fact that you can scale, then it becomes almost a bit of a mathematical conversation. It's like, here's all inputs, here's a hypothesis. Does this align with what you're looking for? And your expectations about sort of me as a founder and as a business, like does this fit? And I think those conversations I really enjoy having, because there's it's just a whole lot easier. But
it's just evidence based, right? So
that's right. And everybody's taking a bet, like when you're investing, because there's big multiples on your revenue on the expectation that you're going to hit them in the future. And of course, I think the VCs have got a lot of protection in place for the downside, but that's how you get the capital in the first place.
So this is the time where we get to the end of the episode and we have a question to you that comes from our previous guest. And so I have one from Bron, the founder and co-CEO at Springload, who asked, who has been the most inspirational person in your life, be it business or personal?
So probably have to say I've never actually met him, but this guy Bill Day, who was one of the founders of a company called Seaworks in Wellington, and I remember going to a presentation that he was one of the speakers at when I was quite young, and the story that I found captivating about what he told about sort of founding that business was how it was everything. Like it was like, it wasn't just sort of a job. This was like the wildest, craziest adventure you could possibly go on. And I think building a company sort of and taking on the world at that point in my life, it was a real contrast because I would have been 17, 18 or something. You contrast it with the advice that you get about having a career as an adult at school, right? It's very much you go and follow these particular professions and you develop these skills and you sort of hopefully get a job somewhere. And Bill's view was just so different. It was just like, no, you just go charging into the stuff. You've got no idea what the hell you're doing, and you just go running into it, and you just have an absolute ball of a time doing it. And I think that framing of what business can be and what it should be is quite. It was just so different. And it's something that I sort of believe in. Actually, one of our core values at Runn now is adventure. And I think maybe that's got something to do with even, what I sort of picked up, all those years ago about, trying to make business a bit of a 2-for-1 game. Like make it the sort of the most exciting thing you can possibly do, as well as having a career. And if you can try and bring those two things together, I think that's just really powerful.
Awesome, mate. Hey, to be springing a question on you like that, you really nailed that. That's good. Yeah, I like that. What would be your question now to the next guest, not knowing who the next guest is going to be?
Yeah, so this is what I'd love to ask, like a lot of really successful people, is that there's a point which the business stuff becomes easy. In the sense, like you've gone through the few traps, like you've got a whole lot of challenges ahead, but there's, you've done this for a couple of decades. You figure out sort of your playbook and how to approach problems. The challenge I think I'd love to unpack is, how do you balance that with growing a family? Because I think that's the part that I think is hard to do, because as I mentioned before, I've got 2 coming on 3 kids, and how do you give them what they need? How do you be a good parent? Give them what they need, whilst also pursuing like a very aggressive sort of growth startup. There must have been some real good nuggets in there, so I'd love to hear what they are.
Well, I won't answer that, being that I'm divorced, but how would you answer that question?
I'm not sure. So it's something, I suppose I feel a degree of sort of perpetual guilt about sort of not being enough of what I need to be for the family. But at the same time, the remote sort of working from home is massive, because it does mean I can sort of take the kids off to school every day, and I can sort of whip up and help out around the house with the family. And so there's a whole lot of flexibilities I've got now, which I think just with working remote is just an absolute godsend. But I'm early in my chapter of a family. The kids are young still, so love to hear from all the people how they've managed to balance those two things. And
yeah, we'll look out for the next episode and you'll hear your answers. I think for me, like, that's the great thing about being a business owner or an entrepreneur, is that when my kids were young, I just left school. I left for work at 3:00 and went and picked them up from school, and we hung out in the afternoons, and so week on, week off, I'd be the best dad I could be, and then the next week I could go and work as hard as I wanted to. And so you can create that balance for yourself as a business owner, or hopefully you're not in that 0 to 1 stage. I think that's a question a lot of people would like to hear the answer to, and read a lot of books on that. Hey man, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure, Tim. It's it's always great to talk to people that have founded not only 1 but 2 successful businesses, and hear the lessons and some of the secrets behind how it's worked and what you're thinking about. And so really appreciate your time, mate.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks.
Cheers, mate. Till next time. That was a really great episode. The thing that I love most about this podcast is you can do anything from anywhere in New Zealand. You can take on any domain. You can go global from day one. You can learn from these people that are just so generous with their time and teach us and help us, and share their mistakes, their failures and their successes. Tim's had a remarkable career, talk about founding SilverStripe from 18 to then now re-upping and going with Runn. It's a fantastic podcast episode. I really enjoyed it. I hope you did too. I love that all of you are watching and listening to us. It's an absolute pleasure and it's a joy. So thank you so much. Please share this episode with anyone you think might enjoy it. Jump down and support us in the comments. Engage, like, share, follow, all those things, just to be a good human and help us out, because we do this for you and we appreciate you. And so thanks for watching.
This podcast is produced by John O'Tucker from Empire Films.